The gleaming halls of the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology buzzed with excitement as 5 students gathered outside Professor Root's office. They shifted nervously, their varied anatomies reflecting the diversity of the galaxy's civilized worlds. Blue stood tall on his 4 legs, his crystalline body catching the light. Mist floated gently in her containment sphere, her gaseous form swirling with anxiety. Pod's plant-like body swayed despite the lack of wind, while Rock's silicon-based form remained perfectly still. Spark's energy form flickered rapidly in his stabilization suit. They were the top students of their year, each chosen for their exceptional understanding of biology across the galaxy. But nothing had prepared them for what waited behind that door. "Enter," came Professor Root's deep voice, resonating through the metal walls. The office was filled with specimens from 1,000 worlds, but the students' attention immediately fixed on the hologram floating above the professor's desk. A blue and green planet spun slowly, white clouds swirling across its surface. "This," Professor Root said, his tentacles gesturing at the image, "is your final assignment. Earth." Blue's crystalline body made a sharp cracking sound, the equivalent of a gasp. "Earth? The Death World." "Professor, that's a Class 12 restricted planet." "Precisely." Professor Root's eyes shifted through various colors, showing his satisfaction. "You 5 have been chosen for the first student research mission to Earth since its discovery. The humans have finally agreed to host academic observers." Mist's gaseous form condensed slightly, a sign of concern. "But Professor, the conditions there, the gravity alone would crush most of us." "Which is why you'll be equipped with the latest environmental suits." Professor Root brought up another hologram showing advanced protective gear. "These suits will shield you from Earth's extreme conditions, the crushing gravity, the corrosive atmosphere, the extreme temperature variations. You'll be protected from it all." Pod raised a leafy appendage. "I've studied Earth's file. Their biodiversity is disturbing. Species there evolved to inject poison into others. Some even eat living creatures whole." "All true," Professor Root confirmed. "But you'll be staying at their International Xenological Research Center. It's located in what they call the Rocky Mountains, a relatively stable region. The humans have assured us it's one of their safer areas." Rock's silicon surface rippled with doubt. "Safer by Earth standards isn't saying much. The whole planet is geologically unstable. Their tectonic plates are still active." Spark's energy form pulsed rapidly. "I heard they have energy discharges in their atmosphere that can fry electronics. They call it lightning and treat it as normal." Professor Root raised several tentacles for silence. "Your concerns are valid, but consider this. Humans don't just survive these conditions, they thrive in them. Understanding how could revolutionize our understanding of adaptation and evolution. Your mission is to observe and document not just Earth's conditions, but how humans interact with their environment." The students exchanged glances, their various forms expressing a mixture of fear and curiosity. "The mission starts in 3 cycles," Professor Root continued. "You'll each focus on different aspects. Blue will study their geological interactions, Mist their atmospheric adaptations, Pod their biological relationships, Rock their structural developments, and Spark their energy utilization." He paused, his color shifting to a serious tone. "Remember, despite appearances, humans are classified as a Class A sapient species. They may seem primitive, living on such a hostile world, but they've achieved faster than light travel despite evolving in conditions we consider lethal. Treat them with appropriate respect." The students absorbed this information, each imagining what horrors and wonders awaited them on Earth. "One last thing," Professor Root added, his color now showing concern. "Don't let your guards down. Even the humans consider much of their world dangerous. That should tell you everything you need to know." Dismissed. As the 5 students left the office, their minds raced with preparations needed for their mission. None of them noticed Professor Root activating his communication device after they left. "Central registry. Yes, the students have accepted. Please inform Earth's representatives that Project Fresh Perspective is proceeding as planned. And make sure their medical facilities are ready. Something tells me we're going to need them. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was rougher than any of the students expected. Their ship's shields glowed bright orange as they pushed through the thick blanket of gases that surrounded the planet. Even with their advanced technology, they could feel the vessel shaking. How do humans travel through this regularly? Mist wondered, her gaseous form swirling anxiously inside her containment sphere. Their landing site came into view, a large flat area nestled between towering peaks of rock that stretched up toward the sky. The International Xenological Research Center stood out as a cluster of white buildings against the brown and green landscape. Scanning local conditions, Blue announced, his crystalline form gleaming as he operated the sensors. Gravity at 9.8 meters per second squared. Temperature at 293 Kelvin. Atmospheric pressure at 1 standard Earth atmosphere. He paused, everyone's suits functioning properly. The others confirmed their environmental systems were working, though each felt the crushing weight of Earth's gravity even through their protective gear. As they prepared to exit their ship, they saw a group of humans approaching. "Remember," Rock said, his silicone surface rippling with nervous energy, "no sudden movements. Humans are known to be easily startled and can react violently when threatened." The ship's door opened with a soft hiss, and Earth's atmosphere rushed to meet their sensors. Leading the human delegation was a tall figure who walked with casual confidence despite the brutal environmental conditions. "Welcome to Earth," the human called out cheerfully. "I'm Professor James, head of Xenobiology here at the center. We're incredibly excited to have you all here." The students were struck by how the human wore nothing but thin fabric coverings, completely exposed to the lethal environment. Even more shocking was the clear container he held, filled with a transparent liquid. "Would any of you like some water?" Professor James offered, lifting the container. Pod's leaves trembled in horror. "Is that dihydrogen monoxide, the universal solvent? And you're going to consume it?" "Oh, right." Professor James laughed, taking a long drink from the container. The students watched in horrified fascination as he swallowed the corrosive liquid. "I forgot that most species find our relationship with water unusual. Don't worry, we have proper nutrient solutions prepared for each of you." As they walked toward the research center, the students' sensors were overwhelmed by the raw data of Earth's ecosystem. Countless small organisms flew through the air, while others crawled across the ground. Vegetation grew everywhere, fighting against gravity to reach toward the local star. "Those are birds and insects you see flying," Professor James explained, pointing to various creatures. "And yes, all of our plant life has evolved to grow despite our gravity. Quite remarkable, isn't it?" Sparks' energy form fluctuated rapidly as they passed under a tall green organism. "This plant, it's taller than the building. How does it not collapse?" "That's a Douglas fir tree," Professor James said proudly. "They can grow over 100 meters tall in the right conditions. We have even larger species in other regions." Inside the research center, the students were led to their adapted quarters. Each room had been specially modified to match their home environments as closely as possible. But even through the environmental controls, they could feel Earth's power pressing in around them. "Get some rest," Professor James suggested. "Tomorrow, we'll begin your orientation. There's so much to show you." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountain landscape, the students gathered in Blue's room to share their initial impressions. "Did you notice," Mist said quietly, "how he didn't even check his environment once? No sensor readings, no safety protocols." "They don't need to," Rock responded. "They evolved here. Everything we find lethal, they find normal." Through the window, they watched the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and red as Earth's rotation carried them away from their star's light. "Professor Root was right," Blue observed. "We're not just here to study a death world. We're here to study the species that conquered it." None of them slept well that night, each wondering what other surprises Earth had in store for them. The second week of their Earth stay began normally enough. The alien students had started to develop a routine, taking readings and making observations from the safety of the research center. That morning, however, something was different about the sky. The atmospheric pressure is dropping rapidly, Mist reported, her gaseous form condensing with worry as she checked her instruments. And look at those cloud formations. Dark clouds rolled across the mountain peaks, transforming the bright morning into an ominous twilight. The wind picked up speed, making the massive trees bend and sway in ways that seemed to defy physics. Professor James walked into the observation room, checking something on his primitive electronic device. "Ah, looks like we're in for quite a storm. Perfect timing for your weather studies." "You mean this is a normal occurrence?" Pod's leafy structure trembled. "These energy readings are off the scale." Before the professor could answer, a brilliant flash of light split the sky, followed by a tremendous boom that shook the entire building. The alien students recoiled in terror. "Just a bit of thunder and lightning," Professor James said casually. "Though this storm does look like it might be a good one. Would you like to observe from the weather deck?" "Observe? From outside?" Blue's crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. In these conditions, despite their protests, professional curiosity won out. Minutes later, they found themselves on a covered observation platform, their environmental suits cranked to maximum protection. The wind howled around them, carrying particles of dihydrogen monoxide in its currents. Another lightning bolt crashed nearby, illuminating the entire valley. Spark's energy form fluctuated wildly inside his containment suit, the raw electrical discharge. It's beautiful and terrifying. Suddenly, Rock's sensors began blaring. "My suit's electromagnetic shielding is failing. The atmospheric electrical activity is too intense." "Inside, quickly," Professor James shouted over the wind, ushering them back toward the door. Just as they reached it, a deafening crack shook the air, and a nearby tree burst into flames after being struck by lightning. Safe inside, the students watched in horror as the rain intensified, turning the world into a blur of water and wind. Occasional flashes of lightning transformed the scene into a strobing nightmare. How often does this happen?" Mist asked, her gaseous form barely maintaining cohesion from shock. "Oh, we get storms like this every few weeks during this season," Professor James replied, making notes on his tablet. "Though I must say, this is a rather good one. Look at that hail starting to form." The students watched in stunned silence as frozen chunks of water began falling from the sky, bouncing off the ground with considerable force. "Your species evolved in these conditions." Pod's voice was barely a whisper, with energy bolts randomly striking from above, frozen water projectiles, and wind strong enough to topple your vegetation. Professor James smiled. "Actually, this is quite mild compared to some of our weather events. Wait until you learn about hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards. There are worse weather patterns than this." Blue's crystalline structure made a sound like tinkling bells, the equivalent of nervous laughter. "Much worse," Professor James confirmed cheerfully. "This is just a typical thunderstorm. Though we should probably check on Rock's suit. That electromagnetic interference could be a problem." As they helped Rock run diagnostics on his damaged environmental suit, the storm continued to rage outside. Through the windows, they could see humans walking about in the rain, protected by nothing more than thin water-resistant coverings and handheld force field devices they called umbrellas. "I think I understand now," Spark said quietly, his energy form pulsing thoughtfully. "Earth isn't just a death world because of its conditions. It's a death world because these conditions are considered mild enough that humans don't even notice them anymore." The others nodded in agreement, gaining a new appreciation for the resilience of their hosts. If this was what humans considered normal weather, what other terrifying phenomena did they casually accept as part of daily life? "Today," Professor James announced with a bright smile, "We're going on a light hiking expedition." The 5 alien students exchanged worried looks. After the thunderstorm incident 3 days ago, they had grown even more cautious about Earth's dangers. But their research required field observations, and their protective suits had been repaired and upgraded. "Just a simple walk up one of our smaller trails," the professor continued, pointing to a path that wound up the mountainside. "Perfect for studying how humans interact with vertical terrain." Blue's crystalline form trembled slightly. "Define simple and smaller by Earth standards, please." "Oh, only about 3 kilometers up, with a 500-meter elevation gain," Professor James said casually. "We'll be back by lunch." The group set out under the morning sun. Despite their environmental suits working at full power, Earth's gravity pulled at them relentlessly. Every step was a battle against the planet's crushing embrace. How do you move so easily?" Pod gasped after just 10 minutes, his plant-like form drooping despite the suit's support systems. The professor was walking upright, barely breaking a sweat. "Years of evolution," Professor James explained, pausing to let them rest. "Our muscles and bones developed under these conditions. Actually, we need this gravity to stay healthy. In space, our bodies start to weaken without it." Mist's gaseous form swirled sluggishly in her containment sphere. "You mean you actually get stronger in these conditions?" "Exactly. The constant fight against gravity builds our—" Professor James stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. A low rumbling sound filled the air. "Another storm?" Spark asked, his energy form flickering nervously. "No," Rock replied, his silicon-based sensors vibrating. "Something's moving. Above us." They looked up to see rocks tumbling down the mountainside. First small ones, then larger boulders. The professor reacted instantly. "Rock slide." Everyone under the outcrop. The students watched in horror as rocks the size of their ship crashed past their shelter, leaving deep gouges in the ground. The noise was deafening, even through their protective suits. This is why we studied the geological reports so carefully," Blue said, his crystalline form resonating with the vibrations. "The entire mountain is slowly being pulled apart by gravity." Professor James nodded. "Erosion is a constant process here. Wind, water, temperature changes, and gravity work together to reshape our landscape continuously." As the dust settled, they observed the aftermath. The trail ahead was completely blocked by fallen rocks, some larger than the humans' ground vehicles. "Well," Professor James said cheerfully, "this gives us a perfect opportunity to study human problem-solving in hostile conditions. Watch this." He pulled out his communication device and spoke briefly. Within 20 minutes, a team of humans arrived with equipment. The students watched in amazement as the humans worked together, using machines and their own strength to clear a path through the rubble. "Notice their muscle structure," Mist observed, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "They're actually adapted to lift and carry heavy objects in this gravity." "Indeed," Rock added, scanning the working humans. "Their endoskeletal system is remarkably dense, yet flexible enough for complex movements." After the path was cleared, Professor James suggested they head back to the research center. The students agreed quickly, their suits' power supplies already strained from fighting Earth's gravity. On the return journey, Spark spoke what they all were thinking. "We keep analyzing Earth as a death world because of its conditions, but we're missing something crucial. It's not just that humans survive here. They've turned these lethal conditions into advantages." That evening, as they recharged their suits and reviewed their data, the students began to understand a fundamental truth about Earth. It wasn't just a hostile environment that humans had learned to survive in. It was a forge that had shaped humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. "Perhaps," Blue suggested as they compared notes, "we should be less worried about Earth's conditions and more interested in what those conditions create." Today's lesson, Professor James said as he led the students through a reinforced observation room, is about Earth's wildlife. The wall-sized windows looked out over a clearing in the forest. Various Earth creatures moved about, unaware they were being watched. The alien students had their sensors running at maximum sensitivity, trying to understand the complex web of life before them. That small creature there, Pod pointed with a leafy appendage at a tiny furry animal. It seems harmless enough. Ah, that's a chipmunk. Professor James smiled. Cute little thing, isn't it? But watch this. A shadow passed overhead. The chipmunk froze for a split second, then darted into a hole. Moments later, a larger creature swooped down with sharp curved claws, missing its prey. A perfect example of predator-prey relationships, the professor explained. That was a hawk. Nearly every species here has evolved either to hunt or to avoid being hunted. Sometimes both. Mist's gaseous form churned anxiously. You mean most Earth life forms are naturally aggressive? Not aggressive exactly, Professor James corrected. Just adapted. Even the plants have developed defense mechanisms. Some are toxic, others have thorns, and a few can even move to trap prey. Blue's crystalline structure vibrated with concern. Plants that eat other life forms. That's disturbing. Professor James was about to respond when the sensors started beeping urgently. A large shape emerged from the forest edge. A massive brown creature walking on four legs. Nobody move, the professor whispered, his voice suddenly serious. That's a grizzly bear, one of Earth's apex predators. The students watched in terrified fascination as the bear sniffed the air. Even through the reinforced windows, they could sense its power. Its muscles rippled under thick fur as it moved, each step showing the ease with which it handled Earth's crushing gravity. The readings are impossible, Rock reported, his silicon surface rippling with excitement and fear. That creature has enough bite force to crush my environmental suit like it was nothing. Correct. Professor James nodded. Bears are incredibly strong. But here's something even more interesting. Humans used to hunt them. Hunt them? Sparks' energy form flickered in disbelief. How could soft-bodied humans possibly overcome such a creature? Tool use was part of it, the professor explained. But our main advantage was endurance. Humans can't run as fast as most animals, but we can run longer. We're one of the few species that cools through sweating, which lets us keep moving long after other creatures need to rest. The bear suddenly stood on its hind legs, reaching a height that made even Blue's tall form seem small. It let out a roar that made the observation room's windows vibrate. Your species, Pod's voice trembled, hunted creatures like that. For food, clothing, and sometimes just to protect our territories. Professor James said, early humans learned to be apex predators themselves, despite not having the strongest natural weapons. As if to demonstrate Earth's endless variety of dangers, a small snake slithered past the window. Don't worry, that's just a garter snake, the professor reassured them. Not venomous, though we do have plenty of venomous species too. Speaking of which, let me tell you about something called a platypus. It's one of the few mammals that produces venom. The students spent the rest of the day learning about Earth's bewildering array of survival strategies. They learned about animals that could regenerate lost limbs, insects that could lift many times their own weight, and creatures that could survive being frozen solid. I think I understand now, Mist said later as they reviewed their notes. Earth's gravity and weather aren't the only threats. Every living thing here has evolved to be dangerous in its own way. Yes, Blue agreed, his crystal structure glowing softly. And humans, they learned from all of it. They studied these creatures, adapted their strategies, and became something more dangerous than any single species. The students looked out at the darkening forest, knowing that even now, countless creatures were hunting, hiding, and surviving in ways their homeworlds had never imagined. And somewhere in that evolutionary arms race, humans had emerged as the most adaptable and dangerous of all. The ground began shaking during their morning meal. At first, it was just a small tremor that made their containers vibrate. Then the whole building started to sway. Earthquake, Professor James shouted, jumping to his feet. everyone under the doorways or tables. Now, the alien students froze in panic as their sensors went crazy. The planet itself was moving beneath them, its mighty plates grinding against each other with unimaginable force. "Move," the professor ordered, pulling Pod's plant-like form under a reinforced doorway. The other students quickly followed, their environmental suits straining against the violent movement. "The building's structural integrity is failing," Rock reported, his silicon form analyzing the stress patterns in the walls. "We need to evacuate." But Professor James was already talking into his communication device. "Status report. Any injuries in Block C?" "Good. Get everyone to the emergency shelter." "Wait. What about the geology lab?" The professor's face changed when he heard the response. The students had never seen him look so serious. 2 researchers trapped in the lab's basement. Mist's gaseous form swirled anxiously. "The rescue teams will handle it, right?" To their shock, Professor James started running toward the danger. "The rescue teams are 20 minutes away. The lab's foundation is cracking. We don't have 20 minutes." Without hesitation, several other humans joined him, grabbing emergency equipment as they ran. "They're going towards the collapse." Spark's energy form flickered in disbelief. "But their bodies are so fragile compared to these forces." The alien students watched through their sensors as the humans worked together. They lifted fallen debris that should have been too heavy for their muscles, crawled through spaces that were barely large enough for their bodies, and ignored the continuing aftershocks that threatened to bring down more of the building. "Look at their vital signs," Blue observed, his crystalline structure vibrating with the tremors. "Their stress hormones are elevated, but they're not panicking. They're actually becoming more focused." Within minutes, the humans had created a makeshift support structure from the debris itself. Professor James and another researcher crawled into the dangerous space. "Their problem-solving speed is remarkable," Rock noted. "They're not just reacting to the disaster, they're using it. See how they're turning collapse beams into leverage points." Soon, they heard cheering. The trapped researchers were being helped out of the basement, dusty but alive. Just as the rescue finished, a major aftershock hit, and the remaining structure of the geology lab collapsed completely. 2 minutes, Pod whispered. If they had waited 2 more minutes. Professor James returned to them, covered in dust and sweat but smiling. "Sorry about the excitement, everyone. Don't worry, we have procedures for earthquakes. The cleanup crews are already on their way." "You knew the building could collapse at any moment," Mist said. "Yet you went in anyway. Why?" The professor looked surprised at the question. "Because people needed help. It's what we do." Later that evening, as repair crews worked on the damaged sections of the research center, the alien students gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. "I think we've been looking at Earth's dangers all wrong," Spark said. "Yes, this planet is trying to kill them constantly. But that's exactly what makes humans so extraordinary. They don't just survive here," Blue added. "They've learned to use every challenge to make themselves stronger. Even their rescue techniques came from learning how their world's disasters work." Rock's silicon surface rippled thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's why Earth is really classified as a death world. Not because of its natural dangers, but because it created a species that refuses to accept defeat," Mist finished. "A species that runs toward danger to help others, that turns obstacles into tools, that faces planetary-scale disasters with nothing but their tools and determination." The students watched through the windows as humans continued working through the night, rebuilding what nature had destroyed. They finally understood. Earth wasn't feared because it was deadly. It was feared because it had forged humanity in the fires of its challenges, creating something the galaxy had never seen before. The 5 alien students sat in their ship's communication room, preparing to present their findings to the Galactic Academy's Board of Sinological Studies. Their month on Earth had changed them in ways they never expected. "Remember," Blue's crystalline form sparkled nervously, "we need to be clear about our recommendation to change Earth's classification." The large screen came to life, showing the board members, the most respected cynobiologists in the galaxy. Professor Root sat among them, his tentacles arranged in a formal pattern. "Students," the board chairman spoke, "we are eager to hear your conclusions about Earth. Please proceed." Mist floated forward, her gaseous form steady and confident. "Honorable board, we came to Earth expecting to study a death world. Instead, we discovered something far more significant." The students took turns presenting their evidence. Blue showed geological data about Earth's constant tectonic movements. Mist presented atmospheric analysis of the violent weather patterns. Pod displayed records of the planet's aggressive biodiversity. Rock demonstrated the crushing gravity's effects. Spark shared readings of the powerful electrical storms. All these factors confirm Earth's status as a Class 12 death world, Rock stated. However, we recommend a change to its classification. The board members stirred with interest. Professor Root's colors shifted to show curiosity. "Not to a lower threat level," Pod clarified quickly, "but to a new category entirely. We suggest creating a special classification, Crucible World." "Explain," the chairman demanded. Spark's energy form pulsed as he spoke. "Earth isn't just dangerous. It's dangerous in a way that creates something unique. Every threat on Earth has shaped its dominant species, humans, into something remarkable." The students shared their recordings. Humans casually drinking water that could dissolve some species' bodies, walking through gravity that could crush others, treating lethal weather as a minor inconvenience. But the most important evidence came during a crisis. Blue continued, showing footage of the earthquake rescue. Humans don't just survive Earth's dangers, they've learned to use them. They study their predators to become better hunters. They learn from disasters to build stronger shelters. They turn their environmental challenges into advantages. Mist moved forward again. "We went to Earth thinking we would study why it's feared. We discovered that Earth itself isn't what the galaxy should fear. It's what Earth creates." The students displayed their final data. Humans working in space, building ships, exploring other worlds. "They're not escaping their death world," Rock explained. "They're taking its lessons with them. Every human carries Earth's strength wherever they go. And most importantly," Pod added, "they help others face these challenges too. They taught us how to survive on their world. They protect weaker species. They run toward danger to save others." The board was silent for a long moment. Finally, Professor Root spoke, his colors showing pride. "You recommend we warn the galaxy not about Earth's dangers, but about how those dangers have forged humanity." "Yes," all 5 students answered together. Spark concluded their presentation. "Earth should be reclassified because it's not just a planet that kills. It's a planet that creates survivors. Every challenge humans overcome makes them stronger. Every disaster teaches them new skills. Every danger becomes their tool." The chairman leaned forward. "And you believe this makes Earth more significant to galactic security?" "Absolutely," Blue responded. "Other death worlds kill. Earth creates a species that refuses to die, that turns every threat into an opportunity, that faces the impossible with determination and ingenuity." The board discussed quietly among themselves. Finally, the chairman spoke again. "Your recommendation will be considered. Is there anything else?" Mist floated forward one last time. "Just this. We went to Earth to study why it's dangerous. We left understanding why humanity is remarkable. The galaxy fears Earth because we don't understand how something so deadly could produce something so resilient. But maybe we should stop fearing it and start learning from it, just like humanity has been doing all along." As the screen went dark, the 5 students looked at each other. They had arrived on Earth as observers of a death world. They left as witnesses to something far more important, the birth of a species that had turned their planet's deadliest challenges into their greatest strengths.